Years ago, I found myself curled up on the couch over the 4th of July weekend, wondering why I felt so terrible. I had no idea my heart was failing. I also had no idea that the experience would completely change the direction of my life. Today, I want to talk about the lessons that came from it and why I'm still teaching those lessons every day. You are a miracle. I am a miracle. I've been on quite a personal journey, one of surrender and self-discovery. I often tell people that I didn't have a midlife crisis. Instead, a midlife crisis had me. My life path was disrupted when my heart began to fail. One 4th of July weekend, 20 years ago, I found myself curled up on the couch wondering why I was feeling so crappy. One more day of lying there would have made the difference between life and death. Had I not self-diagnosed improperly, I might add, a concern about my symptoms that sent me to seek emergency medical attention, I could have very well suffered a stroke, cardiac arrest, which can occur during a heart attack and result in death if not urgently treated, or the term that struck me the most, cardiac death. Death from sudden cardiac arrest. The fact that you're here means that you're part of my miracle journey. When my health crisis derailed my life, I had to build a new track in life. Society tells us that in order to be considered successful, we have to set high standards, achieve our goals, never give up, and never look back. I had always aligned myself with that concept until my heart gave out and I found myself so weak that I was unable to even walk from my bedroom to my living room without having to rest. Through more than 2 years of dealing with heart problems, seeing heart specialists, undergoing numerous tests and surgeries, there came a time when I realized that I just couldn't make the things happen that I most wanted in life. My future was beyond my control. That's an excerpt from my book, Heart Lessons, which is the first book that I wrote. And like I said, the self-diagnosis and the symptoms were, oh man, I remember feeling this. First of all, we had a party that weekend. It was the man that I was dating. It was his birthday. So we were drinking margaritas. So at first I thought maybe it was just a hangover. I was just feeling really bad, but it wasn't a hangover. I knew I hadn't drank enough to be hungover for several days, and the breathing just got harder and harder, and I was weaker and weaker, and I just didn't feel well. And by the time I realized that I needed to go to the ER, I had actually been looking in some family medical journals that I had, like medical books. And I was just kind of going through the process of what my symptoms were. And every single one of them said, you need to seek medical attention. There might be some sort of obstruction. And by the time I got to the ER, I did feel like my belly felt like I had drank a gallon of water and had run around the block. And I just couldn't breathe. I was feeling terrible. We sat in the ER for all day, and they ran a bunch of tests, and they still sent me home. They've sent me home and told me to see my doctor the next day, within 24 hours, a standard ER, policy. So I didn't have a, primary care physician. I had asked my gynecologist as to be my primary care. So I called his office, and I told him it's not a woman issue, but I spent the evening in ER and I wanted to come in and get checked out. And he saw me right away. And thankfully, my doctor had noted, he knew me, so he knew that I wasn't faking symptoms, or there was nothing like that going on. He knew my physical, my health. And he said, I'm not really concerned about your lungs right now. I'm concerned about your heart. But he didn't have the proper equipment. He's a gynecologist and an obstetrician. He doesn't have a EKG machine or a heart monitor, just the kind of blood pressure cuff. So he called a cardiologist and just said that he's expecting you. And I go, oh, you're going to send me for more tests? And he goes, no, this is an emergency. He's waiting for you at his office. And they hooked me up to the EKG machine. First, they were very, very incredulous about me showing up, at the doctor's office. I wasn't coming in from the hospital, and he wasn't being sent to the hospital. My gynecologist sent me right over to the cardiologist. And as soon as they hooked me up to the EKG machine, they saw that my heart rate was 161 beats per minute. And I was in AFib, atrial fibrillation. And to tell you the truth, I was so naive. I didn't even know what my heart rate was supposed to be. And I didn't even know what atrial fibrillation meant. And that began the journey of figuring it out. Now, at this time, also, I will share this. Just a few months earlier, before my heart issue, this was 2006, I had just bought a brand new 2006 red Ford Mustang GT, my favorite car. And that car quickly became the steed that took me to every single doctor's appointment that I had following that, and became my heart car. And I used my Mustang for several years as part of my branding efforts. But you know what? The lesson for me was somewhat, it was slow down, but that wasn't the lesson. The lesson wasn't be careful, even though I had been careful my whole life. I was taking good care of my health. What it was, the lesson that I learned, follow your heart. Do what you love to do. I had to rediscover what my purpose was. I was deep in radio at the time, and this derailed my entire radio career, actually. I was early 40s, and I had been raising my kids as a single mom, and this was the time frame where my kids were graduating high school and were ready to be on their own. So I was going to be free to pursue a higher level executive career in radio, and this completely derailed it. And I had to be open to discovering a brand new purpose. And I had to learn how to trust myself and trust that I knew what my heart's desire was. Fortunately, I was writing a journal already. So the entire experience of my heart issue, my heart crisis, the heart failure and the recovery and the medications was all in my journals. And as I was realizing what I wanted to do, I wanted to help people who had found themselves in a crisis. Now, one of the things that I learned was with a health issue, there is a secondary issue that happens, and that could be depression or anxiety. They call it a comorbidity. And I had never really thought I had anxiety or depression, and I was discovering that it was accelerating, it was amplifying with my heart issues. I mean, I still had kids to take care of. I was having financial problems. I couldn't work. I couldn't make more money to pay my medical bills. And it was just a domino effect where my kids were scared they were going to lose their mom. My parents were afraid they were going to lose their daughter. I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to continue with my life, but I was also not able to work, couldn't function, couldn't travel. And I was losing money because of that. And I had medical bills that were going to cause me to lose my house. It was extremely stressful. And I had to learn to listen. And I had to learn to listen to what called me forward as I was going through this. I'd always wanted to be an author. I'd always wanted to be a writer. But the thing is that I was so inundated with real life that it was one of those things I kept putting off. I'll do that later. I'm going to write one day, maybe when my kids are grown. And this was kind of getting to that point when my heart was cured. And it's all in my book, Heart Lessons. But when my heart was cured, I knew I wanted to do something different. And I went on to grad school and became a licensed psychotherapist. But while I was interviewing for jobs in the mental health field after grad school, after I'd gone through, all of the training, then you got to apply for a job in the field. And what happens when you apply for a job? You show them your resume. The question kept being asked, what happened to you? If you have this long background in radio, why are you leaving radio and going to grad school so that you become a mental health professional? And obviously you're interviewing for very low paying jobs. Well, I started to tell my heart story and how my heart changed my life and my perspective in more ways than one. And now I wanted to help people. And so as I told them the story about my journey, I was encouraged. You should really write a book about that. That would encourage a lot of people who have had their entire life derailed for whatever. So Heart Lessons includes, the lessons that I learned. It's not a chronological book. It's not chronological. It is lessons in surrendering, lessons in grief, lessons in listening, lessons in discipline, lessons in patience, and then from my heart to yours. And the whole purpose of the book is a story of healing in the midst of heart failure that will inspire you to follow your heart. So my story became my first book, and the book became my message. And the message is what I teach now. No matter what happens to you, stay the course, follow your heart, even if it takes you a little bit more time, even if you have to stop and figure out where you've gone off track or how the track led you to where you are. And maybe you weren't on that course to follow your heart. Or maybe what's happened in your life, your heart has changed, and it's okay. Keep following it. So heart lessons taught the lesson, and License to be Badass became the framework for living it. So the frameworks that I particularly use in my practice and in the License to be Badass program, and actually in anything that I write, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, is I utilize a lot of positive psychology. Now that's helping people focus on their strengths, their possibilities, and what is working rather than becoming defined by what is wrong. And then I am trained in cognitive behavioral therapy. We call it CBT. It is learning how thoughts, emotions, and behavior influence one another so you can make intentional changes that support growth and well-being. And it basically is like how we think affects the way we feel, which affects the way we behave. So when we can change how we think about something, it'll change how we feel about it, and it'll change how we act about it, behave toward it. And then I was introduced to heart math during my introduction, and that made a lot of sense to me because it uses some of the same technology premise as radio broadcasting, that we are an electrical system. And heart math provides practical tools that'll help calm your nervous system, reduce stress, and create greater emotional balance by aligning your heart and your brain. And one of the things that I realized through that is that we can use music, because if you hold a specific positive emotion for 3 minutes, it changes your entire physiology. Your heart and brain get into coherence, and you are reducing stress. Well, what's 3 minutes? A song. So when we can find a song and attach it to a memory of yours that's personal, you are well on your way to the badass soundtrack. And then neuroscience, obviously, is that we can rewire our brains for success. Our brain cells don't die, they regenerate. And whatever is going on in your brain, how you think, how you feel, those are neural pathways that you have developed through the course of your lifetime. And neuroplasticity and neuroscience has proven that we can change that. It's understanding how the brain works so we can create new habits, improve resilience, and make meaningful, lasting changes in our lives. Many of my clients are using my program. I've got a lot of certified badasses out there. I'd love for you to be one too. That's what I do. I certify badasses. And I have a whole different theme on how I came up with that. And that's not for the purpose of this video. But these tools are used professionally. They're used by therapists all over. I've just kind of put them all together in a really fun, meaningful way for you to improve your life and follow your heart. You are licensed to be badass. And what does badass mean? Badass is also an acronym. So is the WKRP in my Flipping the Format on the Fear of Failure book. And these are practical tools that you can use on a daily basis that will help you improve your life, your attitude, your mindset, reduce the negative impact of stress, and help you think more clearly, and you can be a lot more creative. Now, how does my heart issue and my radio background and my psychology education come together with what I'm doing now? Now I write fiction. I'm done with writing, personal development. I've got Kelly Orchard's Apple a Day, Heart Lessons, which is my first one, which I'm giving away. You can get it for free. Download it from my website, kellyorchard.com, or I'll put the link in the comments for you to just get Heart Lessons absolutely free. Now I'm writing fiction. So Dead Air, the Day the Music Died. Did I use some psychological principles? Yes, it's a psychological thriller. And so I have used my radio experience and knowledge with my interest and education in psychology and created a really fast-paced and exciting psychological thriller based in the world of radio. And what am I doing now? Well, this is the Courtyard at the Radio and Records Café. Now, everything that I do all comes down to what's in this courtyard, whether it's Licensed to be Badass, whether it's Flipping the Format on the Fear of Failure, whether it's Kelly Orchard's Apple a Day. And if I'm talking mental health, great. Or we're talking about radio in the Courtyard, because the Courtyard at the Radio and Records Café is a setting for the next novel. Actually, the next novel is a series. It's a trilogy called The Radio and Records Café. But it's a love story. It's not a psychological thriller. It is a love story that spans 4 decades. Now, isn't this interesting? So the first book I wrote was written in a 24-hour period. Real fast. The next setting takes place for 4 decades. I have to really work on my pacing that I'm writing, not write so fast. But this spans 4 decades. And so how does it do it? So right now what I'm doing is I have written the first of the three, which is called The Frequency of Trust. And it's the story of Pepper McKenzie, who breaks into radio in 1970s. And this takes her all the way through where she finally gets to the point where she buys a radio station. She trusts herself enough. She's learned enough that she can buy herself a radio station. She starts operating it. And the love story is that the character for the second book is Perry Carpenter, and he's a record producer and a musician. And the two of them combine their resources and create this really awesome business where they play live music from local artists every night, and they have conversations in the courtyard about people's life, and they come there to heal, and they come there to celebrate, and they come there to open up new doors for themselves in their lives. And that's what the Radio and Records Café is about. And so right now I am deep into editing The Frequency of Trust because Pepper's story is wrapped up. And Perry Carpenter, he's a musician, and he's like rhythm, playing the drum beat, saying, we're ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. So I think in the next few weeks, I'll be starting to work on the outline and the scenes and the settings for Perry Carpenter. And then the third book will be when the two of them are together and operating their business. So I'm having a lot of fun. And yeah, there's a lot of psychology. There's a lot of emotional depth. There's grief, and there's celebration, and there's loss, and there's trust issues, and there's insecurities, and even more. And it's a lot of fun to write. And, honestly, had I not learned the lessons that I learned from my heart crisis, and had I not stayed the course with education, with my dreams, with following what my heart told me to do or what I wanted to do, I wouldn't be writing these novels. The stories that I'm writing now wouldn't have been developed because it takes life experiences, but you also have to have positive attitude. And so even then those obstacles come, and when something derails you, I'm sorry, you got to be badass. You got to stand up. You got to shake yourself off. You got to pick up some new tools, and you got to keep going. Because what else are you going to do? That's why I wanted to work with badasses, because if you've been through a trial in your life, if you've lost a loved one, if you've lost a job, if you've lost a home, if you've lost a community, if you've lost anything, you've got some grief. But here's what I know. People that I want to work with are the ones who stand up and they keep going. They don't give up. They want to keep going. You're already badass. Let's just get you certified. Let's get you that knowledge, that tools in your toolbox. It's either certified badass, and then that leads to license to be badass. So here's my key thought for you. I didn't stop following my heart after heart failure. I learned the lessons, and I've spent the last 20 years following it. The path eventually led me to where I am today. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I have a private practice. I do phone sessions. So I get to do that on the road with my RV, traveling with my golden retriever Kismet, who's always at my feet and always trying to get me to get him to take out and go play fetch. I'm writing my books. I gave myself the freedom to be isolated enough in an environment that was peaceful that I could write my stories and focus on them. And what did RV life give me? It gave me an opportunity to go back out and visit radio stations across the country. And that was one of the things, follow your heart. Where are you going to go on these RV trips? Because you've been everywhere. And then one night at like 2:00 in the morning, I had this revelation. I can go see radio stations and I can do a podcast, and we can talk about local radio and what they're doing in their communities. And we can say about radio is not dead in small market local communities. And so last year I started that series, Radio is Not Dead, utilizing everything that I do, psychology, writing, radio, travel. And some of them I actually brought my dog on the interview. It was a lot of fun. And then that also introduced that now I could write the Radio and Records trilogy. And it didn't start to be a trilogy. I just felt that the characters needed much more of their story told so that the readers would appreciate just how much that business meant to them. So here's a question for you. What lesson have you learned that still guides your life today? So as I close, here's what I want you to do. Download Heart Lessons. It's absolutely free. And you'll get on my email list. I send a newsletter out every week about all the things that I'm working on. It's not ever a sales pitch. Well, sometimes there might be like, hey, my book's out. I'm going to be looking for ARC readers for my novels. And my videos always have something psychologically and mental health oriented. And my Substack blog offers more insight about the stories that I'm writing. So it's not duplicated content. The videos are different than the blogs. And I would love to have you along on the journey and join me in the Courtyard. Make sure you watch the rest of the July series as I talk about more about the heart issue and the lessons that I learned. But I also talk about RV travel. If you go over to my Substack blog, you'll see how the story of Pepper Mackenzie is taking shape. So here's what I know. The lesson, it hasn't changed. I'm just 20 years farther down the road. If you enjoyed this conversation, I'd appreciate if you'd like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might enjoy it too. And if you'd like to go deeper, I invite you to join me in the Courtyard on Substack. That's where I share the writing journey behind the Radio and Records Café trilogy, along with reflections on creativity, leadership, resilience, travel, and the stories that shape our lives. You'll find the link below, and I'd love to have you join us there.